So like, what did you know about Canada before you came here?
Honestly, as bad as it's going to sound, I don't know if I want to cut this or not, but I thought it was kind of like, oh, it's very like America. But then once you get talking to people and kind of actually experience things, you realize how different you are. I mean, that was kind of what hit me right away when I moved here, to be honest, was like, oh, like I had this totally wrong. I remember waking up one morning, it's minus 50 degrees and everyone's going off to work and people are ice skating on the canal and they're going to the Winter Sculpture Festival. And I was like, these people are insane. These people have lost their minds.
If you could compare Canada and the US, what do you think makes Canada different?
The big cities seem a lot cleaner. Vancouver and Toronto in particular, huge metropolises, I think, by anyone's standards. And in general, they're very, very nice and very clean. And I think there's something about Canada where if you go there and you're like authentic, you're yourself and you work hard, there's kind of no limits there. You might hear in TV shows or movies or pop culture, you know, the American dream, you know, you buy a house, grow a family, blah, 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 blah. I think that's personally the Canadian dream.
If I've done my research correctly, you are a real estate agent living in Toronto. Is that right?
Correct. That's me.
but you're not from Toronto. Where are you from originally? Let's get a little of the backstory.
Yeah, I'm from Cork, Ireland. But I was actually born in Columbus, Ohio, believe it or not. So yeah, parents were working there at the time. Lived there for a whopping 4 months. So hence why I don't have the accent. Hence why I've this accent that you're listening to. So yeah, and basically spent like the vast majority of my life in Cork until I was about 22. And then emigrated to Canada, where I actually ended up in Vancouver first.
Ah, no way. Okay.
Yeah. A friend of mine convinced me to go work in a summer camp. He said he'd have the best summer of your life, I guarantee you. You know, he was there a couple of years ago and they wanted him to come back. And he just didn't want to go back by himself. He wanted someone else to come along with him. He didn't want to be the one Irish guy surrounded by, you know, a bunch of Vancouverites up in Squamish. So he dragged me along, and it was one of the best summers of my life. It was terrific. I mean, it was like stereotypical Canada up in Squamish, as I'm sure you know quite well. Snow-capped mountains, lakes, trees, like stereotypical Canada, straight out of a movie. Like you're like working in a summer camp that's out of The Parent Trap. So it was brilliant, you know.
And your parents, they're Irish as well, but they were just living in the States when you were born.
That's right. Yeah, my dad's from Cork and my mom's from Galway. Very proud Galway woman. And yeah, he was working there at the time as an accountant and getting a master's degree, I think, from Ohio State University. And there was kind of that thinking point of they were there for about 5 years. They'd gotten married in the middle of it. I have an older brother who was 3.5 at the time. I think they're like, should we raise our kids in the US or should we just bring them back to Ireland? And they decided wisely that Cork or Ireland might be a safer place to raise the kids than the US.
Sure. Yeah, I could definitely see that. Tell me about Cork. Where is Cork situated in Ireland?
Cork's down the south of the Ireland. It's it's right down the south. It's the most southerly county. It's the biggest county in Ireland. It's absolutely brilliant crack. I miss it more and more every year, I think. It's kind of a place where you can kind of be anyone you like. Like I've noticed when I come back, you obviously have a different perspective when you travel and when you're away from a place and you get out of the bubble and you go away. But like if you're from Cork or you're walking around the city or wherever you are, I really fully believe you can be anyone you want. Like it's quite bohemian that way. So you can be like kind of, to me anyway, like any race, any gender, any style, like you'll have like goths hanging out with finance bros, hanging out with students, and they're all just like mingling in the same group. Or they might just all be in the same pub and it all works in the same bar or pub or restaurant and no one's really bothered by it. And like it kind of baffles me a little bit when I go back. I'm like, oh yeah, like this is Cork, of course. Like no one really, like it's only if you're like super confident or really cocky, people will call you out. Like, and how we say it is like if you having notions. So if you see someone a bit too high up on themselves, you'd be like, oh, he's having notions there, you know, like he thinks too highly of himself. So you walk in, you just see like all these groups of different people. And I'm like, yeah, like, cause no one has notions in this bar. Everyone's just kind of like who they are and they're just having a great time. And I've noticed that a lot. And it's kind of something I've become more and more proud of. I think as I stay here, especially the way the world is kind of going and a lot of the news at the moment, it's like Cork's kind of one of those places for me anyway, from my perspective, that you can be anyone you want when you go there. No one really bothers you, or at least there's a space for absolutely everyone there. And for being like country like Ireland, which is I guess kind of historically a bit more conservative, especially like Catholic Church and all that, it's class to see like a city kind of like that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think internationally, Irish people do have that reputation of being easygoing, kind of jolly people, not too concerned. And so it sounds like maybe that actually plays out in, in real life. People are also a little bit more chill. Does that mean that Ireland is like pretty diverse in terms of like different ethnicities and immigration and things like that?
It wouldn't have been. And I was actually talking about this with a friend over the weekend, and we were talking about growing up in primary school in the 90s. And, we might have had like, I don't know, like one black kid or maybe one Indian kid like in our entire school, like when we were growing up from the ages
Yeah.
of, so our schools are a little bit different. We would have been from the ages of like 4 to 11 or 12 is like primary school. And then our high school is like your high schools and middle schools together. It's from 12 to 18. But it would be like maybe there's like one kid there. And then by the time so them went into like our version of high school then, 2003 or so, there was maybe like, I don't know, 20 to 40 kids out of like 800 that were from like different backgrounds than like, I guess, Caucasian background or like an Irish, British background. And then like a lot more immigration than I'd say in the last like 10 or 15 years, like tons. Like Dublin now has got like a huge Brazilian population, and like different things like that. And there's different types of restaurants kind of popping up to kind of relate to that. A lot of Asians kind of there, so there's a lot of good food kind of around Dublin and Cork and different cities because you're getting kind of a mix of everything. And like true to Irish people, I think for the most part, we love it. We love kind of a bit more diversity, and we haven't had any of it. We're just a bunch of like extremely white people, like just like pasty, allergic to the sun,
Sure.
white people living on an island. So like very little perspective on what was going on in the outside world, and we've changed rapidly, like in the last 20 years. I think like almost more than any other country. Well, I shouldn't say that because I don't know, but in my perspective, quite fast for like for a country like Ireland.
I mean, I don't know the full history of immigration in Canada either, but from my own personal experience, it also kind of feels like that. Like when I was growing up, I grew up in a very small town in Alberta, just 5,000 people, not a lot of diversity, right? Not a very international place. And then as I got older, kind of into high school, kind of the same story that you're telling, I started to meet more people from different places. And by the time I went to university, I was exposed to all kinds of diversity and different cultures and languages. And that's really when I became super interested in that kind of thing. And so it's a little bit hard for me to separate that from my own personal experience versus the trajectory of the country itself. Maybe it was the difference of me growing up in a small town and then going to university in a bigger city. Maybe that was the difference, but maybe also we've had, more diversity in more recent years in Canada as well. I mean, definitely different types of immigration as well. Like I would say that, people of my generation would have a more international mindset than, for example, my grandparents, right?
Exactly.
Where they were more kind of like there was immigration, but it was definitely more kind of monolithic, I suppose. So yeah, maybe Canada's similar to Ireland in that way. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how fast it became. I suppose like my perception of Canada kind of coming here that it was a very multinational place. Like particularly Toronto. Toronto's like I think one of the most diverse places I've ever been, and I've kind of been all over the world. But there's like a little bit of everything, and it all exists here. There's like a neighborhood called Little Tibet. There's a neighborhood called Little Portugal.
Right.
And there's two Chinatowns. Like it's great here. Well, I'll tell you about coming from like a small town in Alberta, and I don't know if you noticed about me, but I played professional football in the States for a few years. And there was guys,
Okay.
one of my linemen, Monty's his name. And Monty comes from a town in Alabama where population was, I think, about 800 people. And like Monty's like never seen the ocean, So then all of a sudden Monty's like, I was a kicker. So Monty's blocking for me on on our line. And he's massive. He's like 6'6", 380 pounds, like huge guy. But he'd basically like never been on a football team with a white guy, Didn't know anything about Ireland, like hadn't a clue. What was it like? Like just asking like the most like, basic questions. But of course he did, because he comes from like a tiny town in Alabama, and just said like never bothered even probably thinking about Ireland, And then all of a sudden his job is like to protect me on the field. So he'd be asking all these like fun questions like on the sideline. We'd be running off after a field goal, and he'd be like, so do they have football in Ireland? Cracking me up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that would be, I mean, I grew up with a lot of Monties, right? The Monty
Yeah,
type.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's different for me too, because like as an adult, I've gone on, lots of different international trips, and I've learned different languages, and it's, my wife is from Colombia. It's become, a really big part of my lived experience. And so I go out and I do these trips that I like to do, and I have this podcast, and then I go home to my small town, and I know a lot of the same people are there. People that have never gotten a passport and are just they're happy to live their life there. And I sometimes feel like I have that reverse culture shock, where everyone back home is more similar to how I was, but I've changed so much, going on these different trips. And sometimes it's challenging for me to find where I fit in that culture now, years later. My values have shifted and all of that as well. I mean, do you feel like that when you go back to Ireland? Do you have any like reverse culture shock?
You must have been listening to me over the weekend, because again, I was talking to a friend about this exact same thing when I went home, and I kind of felt like, I was back just a couple of weeks ago. There's an NFL game in Ireland, and I was doing a bit of media stuff for it. First ever game, so like massive moment. And I maybe got to be thinking this last few times I've gone over, and exactly what you said. I kind of, not that I don't feel Irish anymore, because I definitely do, but there's a part of me that doesn't feel at home there. And it's very little things. It's like, oh, like, do people still say like, oh, like thank you very much after like buying something in the shop, or the grocery store or whatever? Or do people still say like ta? Or do people like, what do people call dinner? Do they call dinner supper, or do they call it tea still? Or do they now call it dinner? Like little tiny things where I kind of found myself like pausing on my sentence because I'm not really sure what to say, because I'm about to come out with like whatever I've learned the Canadian way is, which is, oh, thank you very much, or you appreciate it or whatever, and then walk away. And I'm like, do they still say that in Ireland? Did I always say that in Ireland? Is that wrong? So I've been like questioning myself on those sort of things, to the point where I almost feel like I'm kind of almost like Irish Canadian now, right? I've been here for like 12 years. So a part of me feels more comfortable being an Irish person living in Canada than to be like a person who goes back to Ireland as someone who used to live there 12 years ago but now lives in Canada. Whatever that means. Like, I should use a better word for that, but I think you get what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think that like when you go to a new country, you obviously go with the expectation that it's going to be new, right? It's a different culture. I mean, depending where you go, it could be a completely different language too. And you know that it's going to be different and you have to get used to it. Now, when you spend some time abroad and then go back to your home country, there's also an expectation that you're supposed to fit in. Like, you're supposed to know all of the mannerisms. You're supposed to know what people say when they buy something at the store or whatever. All the lingo for, is it supper, is it dinner? You're supposed to know that stuff. You kind of feel that way, like an expectation. And so then when you don't fit in,
I'll give you another example, Jared. These are my friends. I remember, like, maybe it was like the 4th or 5th year I was there, and it was my round to buy a few pints during Christmas. We were at a pub. Of course, we're from Ireland, and I went over and I was like, oh, I'll do 4 Beamish, please. And my friend looked at me and he goes, You'll do? What do you mean you'll do? What are you going to do with it? What are you going to do?
Right.
Because that's not what I feel. It's like, I'll have, or I would like, is what you say. Like, the verb do does not mean like, oh, I'll want one. But like when you're in North America, you say like, oh, I'll do a coffee. Do you know it?
Sure.
And it just rolls off the tongue. They have not let me forget that for the last like 7 years. I was at their wedding during the summer and they brought it up. So I just, little things like that.
Well, and also like we have the expectation of ourselves that we should fit into our home country or our hometown, but other people also want to hold us to that standard because they know our history too, right? So like if you're in Ireland with an Irish accent saying I'll do the salmon or whatever, they might pick on you for that. If I did it in Ireland, no one would care because I'm a foreigner, right? And so that's just, that's to be expected, but it's not expected from you. My little sister spent a bunch of time in Scotland this year, I think 6 months or something like that. And I would talk to her on the phone, or she's back in Canada now, and I'll chat with her, and she'll say something like, oh, I was renting this flat. And I go, oh, a flat, really? Okay, not an apartment. You're renting a flat. Or she says, oh, where's the bin? The bin? Okay, like you mean the garbage, right? But you do pick up those things even after a little while. You kind of, I think we all have that desire to fit in and to assimilate to the environment that we're in, and we want the path of least resistance, right? You don't want people to call out, your vocabulary, so you imitate the people around you. And even if it's only a few months, you start doing that. For you, 12 years, oh my gosh, I mean, that's a ton of time to try to assimilate into a place and change the way you speak. And I mean, so let's go back to the beginning of your time in Canada. Then, when did you end up moving there? You said that you spent a summer in Vancouver. That was your first experience in Canada?
No, I had actually moved to Ottawa first because I was going to do a master's degree in Ottawa. So I just finished my Bachelor of Education in Sports Studies and Physical Education. And I had my minor in mathematics. So I was like a teacher, a secondary school teacher. Enjoyed that quite a bit. So I was going to do a master's, going to go to Ottawa. Landed there. I was there for maybe like 2.5 weeks. I was playing rugby at the time in Ireland. So I wanted to kind of continue playing rugby. A team took me out for lunch. They were really, really nice to me. They wanted me to come play. I went to a couple of training sessions. Kind of got used to figuring out this is Ottawa. This is what it's like. This is what life will be like. Okay, great. I'm looking forward to starting in September, but I'll go to Vancouver first and have the best summer of my life. I did until about August 14th. And I got a call from the university on top of a mountain where I was taking care of about 17 kids. And I was like, oh, and they were like, yeah, just want to let you know about you sent us an email about what you needed to get ready for the masters. Well, there actually, there wasn't any room for you. You applied too late. So, yeah, if you'd like to apply again in the spring, you're more than welcome. So, yeah, I got kind of rocked a little bit. So when I was first there then, and then went to Ottawa anyway, and thank God for that rugby team. I started playing a match the week I landed back. I played 2 or 3 games, and then all of a sudden I knew 60 people, nearly all Canadians, and they were lovely. They were sound and really treated me well. And hey, do you want to come here? Do you want to come there? This is what we do on Tuesday nights. This is what we do on Friday nights. This is where we hang out. And so I had as a lot of people may experience who listen to this, I don't know if you know yourself, Jared, but Ottawa can be a bit boring. That's its reputation, and there's not a whole lot going on. I did not have that experience at all. I had an absolute blast there. There was maybe 4 other Irish people in the whole city, and obviously bumped into them, and it was just it was really, really nice.
Mm-hmm. So you were there for how long then? Did you wait until spring to get into that program?
I did. At least that's what I thought. And I was working as an assistant in a real estate office because that was the job I was going to get to pay for it, and it was right across the street from the University of Ottawa, so I could just walk back and forth to lectures and all that. And I was waiting to reapply, and I did, and then they said they lost my transcripts, which at the time, if you remember, now you can lock a PDF, right? It needs to be opened by a password, and to go through any physical mail. By then you had to physically pick up your transcripts from university that were sealed with a wrapped in tape and a wax seal. And so if any of that's broken when it gets to Ottawa, they won't accept it. So I'd gotten that, sent it to them. They lost it. And the only way to get that back was to me physically go back to the University College Cork in person, pick up my transcripts and bring them back. They will not release them to Guardian or anyone you nominate or anything like that. You have to go back yourself. So naturally I got very upset at Catherine. I was very annoyed, and I hung up on her. And then I was in the office at the time, kind of having a bit of a tantrum, and the 2 agents I was working for were like, do you know what? I think you'd be a lot better real estate agent. You kind of have the gift of the gab. Why don't you just we'll pay for you to get your real estate license, and screw them. They're useless. You don't need to go to school anyway. So so that's what I did, and then that opened this whole door to kind of my career in real estate.
So when you were first planning on coming to Canada for that master's program, were you just really committed to the program? You wanted to do this course at this university, or were you looking more specifically for an international experience and the master's just was a way for you to do that?
It was specifically the masters. There was kind of the pull to Canada anyway, because I was going there for the summer camp and I needed to get a visa. And the visa was for 2 years. So it's kind of a case of like, oh, do I like blow it in one summer and then not come back? Or do I try and, as you say, kind of experience it? So maybe it was a bit of both. Like I was kind of doing it for more the experience because I was already there and didn't want to lose that master's either, And it wasn't anything specifically that was calling me about Canada. It was just that my friend happened to mention it. He said it was brilliant. And then I kind of got pulled that way. And then when I researched it, the guy running our master's program turned out to be like this fascinating guy. Dr. Terry Orlick is his name. He used to live in Gatineau there with his dog and his wife on a lake. And the stuff he was talking about was like exactly kind of what it to be. It was like with concentration in sports management. So it was all about like the psyche of like high level sports athletes and like movement analysis and a bunch of like really interesting stuff to me at the time. So it was kind of right up my alley as well. But then of course, Catherine lost the documents and she said everything in faith from then on.
So Canada kind of like screwed up your education, but also sets you on a completely different path that I'm assuming you enjoy.
Yeah, they did and they didn't, They like when one door closes, another door opens, and there's nothing more true than that. And then in a bizarre, like roundabout way, that same Canadian guy, Terry Orlick, Dr. Terry Orlick, he's worked with like a bunch of Canadian Olympians, particularly in skiing, like slalom, the long jump, all that sort of stuff, like a lot of winter sports. I picked up a book years later when I was trying to play football and at the time trying to make it to the NFL. And it was a sports psychology book. It was called In Pursuit of Excellence. So if anyone's into a little bit of psychology, I recommend it. And I read through the whole thing, Jared, I'd say about 3 times. And I loved it. I had it bookmarked, it was the dog tails on it and everything. And it was like highlighted, whatever. And I've never looked at the back at the author. Like I saw the author's name, but nothing clicked. Looked at the back of the author and it's like, so-and-so, Dr. Orlick, works at the University of Ottawa and da-da-da-da. And I'm reading through this thing and I'm like, there's no way. There's absolutely no way this is the same guy. Because I like hadn't really thought about him much after I didn't get into university. Googled him, looked it up. The dude was still alive and like still thriving and still there. And I was like, oh my God, how like, how things kind of actually twist and turn. And like the guy lived like 15 minutes from my house in Ottawa at the time when I discovered this information. I like couldn't believe it. I was like, and I'm still here reading through your book and I think it's the Bible and I didn't get into your course. Like I can't, like just the way that worked out was still kind of baffles me to this day,
Mm-hmm. Everything kind of aligned for you in Canada.
Yeah. Everything I think was supposed to be meant to be. And I mean, I just kind of really enjoyed my experience there anyway. Like I thought it was Canadian people in general, very, very nice, very welcoming. And I think there's something about Canada where if you go there and you're like authentic, you're yourself and you work hard, there's kind of no limits there. Like you might hear in TV shows or movies or kind of pop culture, the American dream, you buy a house, grow a family, blah, 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 blah. I think that's personally the Canadian dream. I really, really do. I think if you work hard in this country, you're authentic to yourself, and you're a relatively decent person. Like you can do anything in this country, which is wonderful about it. Like I cannot praise Canada enough for all it's done for me.
I mean, we definitely get compared to the U.S. a lot, right? We're kind of like the little brother, if you will, in terms of population anyway, and also like in terms of global reach. Like culturally speaking, the U.S. exports a lot more, obviously, with movies and sports and music, and Canada's kind of in the shadow a little bit. So there's a lot of comparisons that are made, but I think that's an interesting idea.
No?
What's that?
We got Ryan Reynolds.
We got Ryan Reynolds. We got Justin Bieber. But here's the thing, like when anytime anyone gets successful in Canada, they go to the U.S. generally, and then people forget that they're Canadian, and we just, another one goes on the pile for the American celebrities and we lose somebody. But
Tom Cruise went to school in Ottawa.
Did he?
Like
really?
8 minutes from the house I was living in at the time when I went there. And someone told me and I was like, that can't be true. That's not true. And I looked it up and it was. Yeah, I went to school in Ottawa for like 2 years, right before he hit it big. Went to high school.
Wow, no way.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the comparison that you're making with the American dream because the more that I learn about the U.S. and how it's kind of set up in terms of their like let's say there's social safety nets or lack thereof. It does seem like it's a really hard place to live as someone who doesn't have a lot of money. I mean, there's a huge separation between the rich and the poor, and not that we don't have that in Canada, just like the U.S. But like, I think that our government also helps people out a little bit more that are like down on their luck. And you do need that for that rags to riches story. Like, you're going to have a higher percentage of people that are successful in society when they get a little bit of a hand up when they need it, right? And so does the American dream work? Yeah, it works for some people, but I would agree that it probably works for a lot more in Canada.
I couldn't agree with you anymore. Like, I think there probably was a time, definitely, and I don't know everything about American history at all, but I think there was a time when that was true, and that's why people said it. I don't know. I really don't know if it's true anymore. And I spent a lot of time there, playing football and also just visiting people. I have some family there, but I think it's tough. I think if you don't have a leg up, you're batting from behind right away, and it's like you're deep in a hole. Whereas I haven't seen that in Canada. Now maybe I'm seeing things through rose tinted glasses as well, because things have gone well for me. And I came here with a degree, and but like I didn't really come here with much else than that, to be honest. I remember actually I had about like €800 with me when I came here. I was just kind of dumb and oblivious to how much money I actually needed to get here. And right away I had to pay for something and it cost you could have been €750. Don't ask me to do the conversion at the time, but probably like $1,200, something like that. So I ended up having like roughly $100 left for like the next 2 weeks until I got paid like that first job. And I was like, oh God, okay. So this is what it's like to live by yourself. And
Yeah.
you know what? I did totally fine. I did totally fine. Didn't need to ask for help because Canadians were reaching out to help me. So, and I don't know if I don't know if you did that now where you succeed or not, but I can almost guarantee if you came to America that I went, you wouldn't make, like Arnold Schwarzenegger's story, came with $75 in his pocket and a dream. And now look at the guy is. Arnold Schwarzenegger would be probably viewed as an immigrant there now, and there are probably people kind of against him and blah, 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 blah. So it's like, it's changed definitely. And I think that's what's great about Canada is you can be the younger brother, but you're like the sane, still with it younger brother who, doesn't kick up a fuss, doesn't throw a tantrum, but typically just does the right thing all the time.
Yeah, maybe like the slightly more responsible younger brother. Hopefully learning from his big brother's mistakes or whatever.
Yes, there you go. Yeah, that's a great idea.
So like, do you feel like you're an internationally minded person, like to begin with? Like growing up, it sounded like your parents were international people spending some time in Ohio. Did you do some traveling? What's that?
Does that count? Spending time in Ohio, the beautiful culture of Ohio,
the exotic cultural hub of Ohio in the U.S.
Yeah, they have a lot of Bob Evans. That's about everything Ohio is going with it.
It's maybe not exotic, but it is international from Ireland.
Correct.
Nonetheless, did you guys do a lot of trips like growing up? Did you go to like some different European countries, or what was that like?
Not as much as other families, and I'm probably gonna sound like ridiculous when I say this, but the majority of our family vacations were all like within Ireland. So at that time, and it still happens a good bit, you'd go to like the west of Ireland, you'd go rent a house kind of near the ocean, and like typically Connemara, we went there quite a bit, out by the Burn, down to Kerry, past a place called Tralee, like our Dingle, if you've heard of like the Dingle Bay in Ireland, which is very nice. Went to Dingle a couple of times. And then randomly, one year we went to Portugal and went to the Algarve and had a great time, which is a very short flight and actually not that expensive. Even now it's not that expensive and it was very easy to get to. But we only went there once. And then randomly, 7 years later, we decided to go to Barbados. So for the life of me, I don't know why my parents picked there. Like they're very fussy eaters. They're very Irish that way. They like literally potatoes, meat, like tiny bit of veg, like not Caribbean food. They don't like jerk food. They don't like food that's cooked in the street. Like they're quite picky that way. They're classic Irish parents. And yeah, and then randomly went again the next year. They loved it so much, like I couldn't get past it. But that was my only real initial exposure of like international travels. I wasn't really outside of it that much, but I was kind of like, I was just a TV kid, Do you know, I would happily wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, sneak downstairs so I don't wake up my parents or my brother. I'd turn the TV down to like one or two volume and I'd watch like cartoons all day long. And of course, none of the cartoons are Irish. You know, they're all like American cartoons or even British cartoons or even some Canadian ones. And that was like my exposure was like TV and cartoons of like international life, I guess, you know?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of countries do that really well, right? They export their media and their culture through it. Like through the media comes the culture as well, and then you can become interested in what they have to offer. So, like, what did you know about Canada before you came here?
Honestly, as bad as it's going to sound, I don't know if I want to cut this or not, but I thought it was kind of like, oh, it's very like America.
Uh huh.
They're just going to be like, they're just going to be like a bunch of Americans.
It is similar to the U.S. I think that Canadians need to understand that. I think we have like this immediate defense where we're like, we're radically different than the U.S. There's nothing the same. And it's like, okay, let's be fair here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of carryover. I mean, look at listen to the way that I talk. I mean, we sound the same. We have a lot of the same holidays, and we share a bunch of cultural things. And so yeah, I get that.
Yeah, that's what I find. I found it so interesting when I moved over was like it's like going to a wax museum. You know, it looks the same, but it's definitely not the same. You know, I knew you weren't the same when I was like walking around talking. You kind of sound the same. Things kind of look the same. You know, there's a few like depending what town or city you're in, but a lot of the towns look the same as a town you'd find in America as well. But then once you get talking to people and kind of actually experience things, you realize how different you are. And I mean, that was kind of what hit me right away when I moved here, to be honest, was like, oh, like I had this totally wrong. I had a perception in my head that this might be it. I guess I didn't really understand how big Canada was either, which I think maybe everyone says. I mean, way bigger than the US, which I mean, I don't even know if a lot of people even really think about that, but that's just something I didn't even think of. Like I played rugby in St. John's. I think the second year I got here, played with a provincial team called the Atlantic Rock, and like people are trying to tell me, it's like more than an 8-hour flight to go from St. John's to Vancouver, and you're still in the same country, which was like just bizarre and baffling. So there was kind of like cool little things like that, and then yeah, just very nice people, very proud of their country, but not overly patriotic either. Absolutely love your flag, like you love the actual flag itself, but in like kind of a very wholesome way. It's like you're just really proud of it, it's like you're just like, oh, look how nice our flag is. Do you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
without any of the kind of toxicity associated with it. And I found that very, very nice, as most Canadians are, nearly all Canadians are.
I mean, with the flag specifically, that's something that stands out to me when I go to the U.S. is that there's flags everywhere. Every other house has an American flag, flying outside. And, Canadians do that a little bit, but not really, not like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that might be like a modern trend at the moment because I was seeing more and more Irish flags in Dublin. Now, not a lot, but more so. I think that's kind of this weird trend that kind of people are doing to kind of try and be patriotic. I want to put up my flag to show how patriotic I am, and kind of like at the same time, without actually saying it, hey, we're like Irish, we don't promote immigration. I guess are trying to, and maybe some people in the US are trying to do that as well. I personally don't agree with it. If you look at a country like the US and Canada, the whole place is built on immigration,
Yeah.
and not a very healthy way of doing it either. Like they initially just invaded, like Christopher Columbus, but
Right.
like the country would not work without immigration. There would be nobody there. You wouldn't have anything. There'd be absolutely no identity. So, I find it a little kind of odd that they're using the flag kind of against that. Then when the flag was basically made by immigrants, I suppose.
I mean, it kind of represents that really fine line between, like, let's say, being patriotic and being like nationalistic.
Yeah.
And it does get like a little bit dicey in there. I mean, if you're proud of your country, great, but it can also become weaponized to say that your country or your people are like better or superior than other people. And then that's where it starts to get like kind of off the rails a little bit. Like going back to Alberta, they have this like when I was back there last week, I suppose. I see a lot of Albertan flags, right? The provincial flag flying around. And that also has become a bit of a political symbol because Alberta has this separatist movement going on at the moment. And so then they use the flag to represent it. At least that's how I interpret it, because I didn't really used to see Albertan flags. So it is kind of strange how flags can be used that way, right? You think that they're just kind of neutral. Oh, they represent this place. But a lot of times there's kind of an underlying political message that can be pushed as well.
Yeah, trying to push, as you said, trying to kind of almost weaponize it a little bit. Trying to turn it into something that it's probably not, but you're hiding behind the fact that no, it's just a flag and I live here.
Who could be mad at a flag? I'm just saying that I enjoy the place where I'm from. And then it's like, yeah, but what are you really saying with that, right? It's usually carries more baggage than that. Not always, but it can, right?
Right.
You said that when you first arrived, you were surprised that it was a little bit different than the US in Canada. If you could compare Canada and the US, what do you think makes Canada different?
The people aren't, like we just talked about, so we'll just say it again. The people aren't as that type of patriotic, I suppose, in the kind of more toxic sense of the word. And you're very, very proud of it, but in like a lovely way. Like you just love being in Canada. You kind of love everything about it. In my experience, you love the landscape, you love the weather. Although some people hate the cold, but most people love it. Like I grew up. God, I lived in Ottawa, and like my first time there, I remember waking up one morning, it's minus 50 degrees, and everyone's going off to work, and people are ice skating on the canal, and they're going to the Winter Sculpture Festival, and I was like, these people are insane. These people have lost their minds. They don't know what's what. But that was kind of cool that they can just kind of embrace it. And I guess it was just some Americans too, but you're very friendly on the streets and in public in cities. Very open to talking. If someone needs help, you kind of give directions. You'll pull people that way, pull people this way, and very good. You're a lot quieter in general rather than the loud neighbors below. In a nice way. You're not probably as rambunctious, and you take a lot of pride in like the country and your oceans and your territories, particularly like all the Northwest Territories and all the like the geographical and the glaciers and the Arctic up there. There's like a sense of like it's not pride, but a sense of like you care about it a lot as a people. Like this is part of who we are. Like we totally accept it. Da, 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 da. And when you go down to the US, like I never really hear anything about that. I would never hear anything about like the indigenous people who are there in general. But in Canada, that's kind of on the forefront. I wouldn't even say the forefront of their mind. Some people it is. And then you're more environmentally sound, but I guess it's kind of around the same kind of mindset as, or the same kind of ideas of that. And then yeah, the big cities seem a lot cleaner, and a lot nicer in general. Vancouver and Toronto in particular, huge like metropolises, I think by anyone's standards. And in general, they're very, very nice and very clean, as opposed to some other US cities. And I'm a massive fan of US cities. New York City is one of my favorite cities in the world. I've been to LA many times, but there just seems to be a more kind of like controlled care of the place around there with a few nicer people. The music is more diverse in the US, which I prefer. Canadians are a little bit more conservative with their music. You like a lot of country, which is the same as the US, but there's not like outside of like the Justin Biebers, I guess, and maybe the Drakes and the Weekends. There's not a lot of diversity outside of that. That's something I guess I've kind of noticed.
So there's country music even in Ontario. I mean, like I grew up with country music everywhere in Alberta, and I always hated it. But I thought that was an Alberta thing. No, it's other places too.
Anywhere you go outside the city, and even within the city, it's all country music everywhere. But maybe I don't think that's the same in the US. But I can't think right now. But yeah, any of the smaller towns love the country music. Love the country music. And I guess similarity is anytime you go outside of a city, everyone's got like a Ford F-150 or some sort of a truck. Everyone's got some sort of a truck. You love your trucks.
Yeah, there's a huge divide, isn't there, between like the, the more city areas and the country areas. And I mean, as someone who grew up in one of those country areas, I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, everyone's got, huge trucks that they probably don't need. A little bit. I don't know. The culture just changes. I think that the politics change. Everything changes.
I guess I found that kind of as another key difference. In some cities, depending how big they are, like New York City and the rest of New York is quite different because it's right at the bottom. It's like this mega city, and then the rest of New York is like, full of kind of lovely lakes and waterfalls and hiking and mountains, and then like Buffalo is like its own sort of thing. But other sort of cities scattered out, I guess a lot of the Midwest cities and other sort of places, you go outside the towns, it's an extension of what that city is feeling. But in Canada, I find the cities and the rural and even the suburbs are very, very different. Whereas in the States, I find them a lot more similar. Just different ways of thinking, different things to do. Like anyone who's not from or not doesn't live in Toronto, like let's say live in the suburbs, or anyone from Alberta, they think it's like insane that people live in Toronto. Like they think it's absolutely nuts. Like, why would you ever want to live there? It's so busy. It's so loud. It's crazy. Like, how could you live in a condo? Like what even is that? Like it's only got 2 bedrooms. Like crazy. Like, what do you mean when it's a balcony? Like, there's like it's like a baffling. It's like this baffling idea to some people. I noticed that quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, like in a lot of ways. I like to talk about culture shock on this podcast. In a lot of ways, my first culture shock was moving to a city from a small town. I mean, because everything was different. The way that people thought was different. The politics were different. Everything was kind of like, whoa, it feels like I'm in a different world, even though realistically I'm, 1 hour over. I mean, I'm in the next town over, but suddenly it feels so different. So I totally agree with you that there's a big cultural divide between rural and like urban in Canada. And now I live in Vancouver, and a lot of people in Alberta would say, well, why would you ever do that? Right? It's so expensive. And, because, in comparison to like the cost of real estate and whatever. So I guess we never really talked about how you made the move from Ottawa to Toronto. So you were in Ottawa, you were playing rugby, the master's program didn't work out, but you became a real estate agent. And then how did you go to Toronto?
I'll lean into this a little bit, but so I was playing football at the time. I was playing that provincial team out in St. John's, so they would fly me from Ottawa to St. John's to go play every now and then, but I was still playing with my club team in Ottawa. And I'll try and be brief with this, but basically I was selected for like the Canadian Rugby Championship, which the 4 provinces kind of play each other, 4 provincial teams. So there's one in St. John's, there's one in Toronto, there's one, I think in Alberta, I think they're called the Prairie Wolfpack, or somewhere around, they pull from like Saskatchewan and Alberta and maybe Manitoba or something like that. And then there's one in BC, the BC Bears. And the first game I was going to play, there was a complaint made against me saying like, why do they have an Irish guy on their team? Because that team's supposed to be a feeder team for the national team for the World Cup. So long story short, I got kicked off the team because I wasn't eligible to play for that World Cup. And I just kind of said, F this. I'm so sick and tired of this. I'm sick of Rugby Canada. I'm sick. Because I'd flown back and forth a lot, and it was annoying. Like, they're kind of a pro team, but they're not really paying you. Like, they're covering your flights and that sort of stuff. So I put a lot of effort into this, and a lot of, like, kind of my heart into playing with them. And so that's when I picked up an American football, and I was like, this thing's got to be easier to kick. Like, I was a pretty good kicker at the time. I was like, I bet you I can just put this over the middle every time. This looks easy. Wasn't that easy, but it took me on this path, like down to a lot of workouts in the States, open tryouts. Like, I hadn't played college or anything, so I'd like no film to back myself up on. I would just show up, lay the accent on as thick as I could, and just be like, yeah, I used to play rugby and I can kick this thing, and hopefully convince them to like give me workout or tryout or whatever, driving all around. And as I was doing this, I was back and forth to Ottawa quite a bit. And I would tell people, oh yeah, I live in Ottawa. And they were like, why don't you live in Toronto? And it's something that I kind of heard in Ottawa, but wasn't really listening, because some people were kind of like, why would you emigrate from Ireland and go to Ottawa? And then as I explained to you, I was like, well, I wanted to do a master's degree, but then Catherine screwed up my whole life and blah, 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 blah. So
Catherine.
I know, God, Catherine. I had to reiterate, regurgitate the story every time. And they're like, I still don't know why you're not in Toronto though, because Ottawa's a bit boring, blah blah blah. So I had on the back of my head that everyone was kind of pulling me to do this, and then over that last year or so, or maybe last year's in Ottawa, or two, I wasn't spending as much time there because I was going back and forth to the States. I was trying to train. I remember flying down to a city outside New Orleans, called Mobile, Alabama. Tiny little place, very, very poor. But they used to have an NFL workout down there. So I was kind of all over the shop, and wasn't spending as much time there. And I was kind of like, yeah, do you know what? Like, why don't I just do this in Toronto? And part of the reason I didn't want to was I was just really intimidated by the amount of real estate agents here. Because at the time, there's like 55,000 licensed real estate agents. And I was like, oh, it sounds so competitive. Da, 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 da. But I just kind of, I came back. I went to the States for about 3 months for workouts. I drove out there with my dog. I drove from Ottawa to San Diego for a winter. Yeah, with me and the dog. And I came back to Toronto and I just said, "Feck, and I'm going to stay here. This is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to work hard and see what it's like and see if I can kind of live in the big smoke, as they'd say in Ireland. If you move to Dublin, they'd call it like, oh, you moved to the big smoke, because it's a big city. So I moved to the big CN Tower and haven't looked back since. So that's kind of in a nutshell.
Wow. I mean, it kind of sounds like you've lived like multiple lives.
I
Like,
have. I can't keep track of myself, so it's good that you're recording because I don't. I can't keep track. It has. It kind of pulled me in different directions. Football and real estate, like they're both very different. Uh, and I would love to have not had a plan B and just been like, no, I'm just going to gung ho on this until I run out of money. But then, like, I was kind of running out of money, so I had to go back and work in real estate. And I was competing against a lot of college kids as well that were kind of on the bankroll of mom and dad. And so, I could only do it for like limited amount of times and then go back and do it. But yeah, I wouldn't really change anything about that side of my life. It was a good experience.
yeah, I mean, it sounds very diverse. You're all over the place. I mean, between Ireland, Canada, the U.S., rugby, American football, real estate. I mean, it sounds varied. Was it hard to go through those transitions? I mean, specifically maybe the cultural ones. I mean, between Ireland and North America, both Canada and the U.S. Was that tricky, or was it challenging at the beginning?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I think rugby's kind of universal across the world in terms of how rugby players act and clubs act. It's big on like community, kind of family. It's a real tight knit community. It's a brotherhood. Like you basically go out in a pitch for 80 minutes and like, beat the shit out of each other, for lack of a better word. And then afterwards, you buy the guy a pint you just played against and you beat up for like 80 minutes. And that's it. And then you're buddies. Like, so there's a great like camaraderie around that I really, really enjoyed. And I found the exact same thing happened in Canada. In fact, they even kind of leaned in a bit more in their traditions. And that's maybe because rugby was a slightly newer game and it was growing in popularity. They leaned into some of those traditions even harder than they would in Ireland because they're already kind of established in Ireland and you kind of do them and if you missed them, it's like not a big deal. But in Canada, if you did, it was like, they'd call you out and they'd make sure you buy someone a pint or you get a pint from the other guy or whatever it would be. You do a speech at the end of every game and you announce the best player. And then going to American football, it was like very, very different. Like, especially when I was playing pro, it was like everyone there was Christian. There was a lot. You prayed before every game. You prayed at the end of every game. Like a lot of the culture was wrapped around religion as well, which, to go all full circle, like Ireland, like our whole legal system, our whole educational system was tightly wrapped around the Catholic Church, basically until like, 2010, 2015. So it felt like kind of almost like going back in time a little bit to see how much is tightly woven around it. And then it's just, the majority of it is like black athletes. So there's different music. They have way different cultures than I would have from Ireland. So like they'd be asking me, they were like, so Conor, like in Ireland, you just like eat potatoes or something? Like you ever had a chimichanga? Or like, or like whatever, And I was like, I don't even know what that is, Miles. I haven't a clue what a chimichanga is, but I'm sure it tastes good. But I was like, yeah, we ate a lot of potatoes. So getting used to that was quite a difference. Like I know I was kind of go into a room and just kind of stay quiet because also like I couldn't understand a lot of the lingo. Um, they'd like he'd be like, bruh, you put a band on that, bruh, and I'm like, I don't know what that means. Like what band are you talking about? And he's like, no, like it's a bet. I'm like, what do you mean bet? And he goes, I put a bet on someone and I put a band on it. And I was like, oh, what's a band? Anyway, a band is 1,000 in like their lingo. So I was lost. I was in the middle of the dressing room, just like lost. So some of that stuff was kind of hard, but do you know if you kind of roll with it? Like they clearly see I was confused. Like it doesn't really matter then. Like, they kind of accepted me because like I was being authentic. I was kind of just being myself, or at least trying to be myself and not trying to pretend that I understood what they were saying or that I understood their culture. And I'd ask them lots of questions. Like I remember with Monty, I'd ask him lots of questions like, what's it like growing up in a town of 800 people? And he's like, it absolutely sucks, to be honest. Like it sucks. Like no one's got any money. There's not really anything to do. You get really bored. Like, a lot of my friends get on drugs, like all that kind of like dark side of the things. So, yeah, I guess I was just curious and authentic, and that kind of helped me push through a lot of those cultural barriers. And I had the asset, Jared, of being Irish, which I think like nearly everyone likes Irish people. I never really got any sort of like negative feedback or like someone just didn't like me right off the bat. Like there was one guy actually, but we don't have to get into that story. But other than that, it was like everyone was kind of very welcoming and just genuinely curious about who I was and how the hell I was playing, in Prescott Valley, Northern Arizona for like this football team. So,
Yeah, I mean, you would definitely stand out there. I mean, in some ways, it was probably more unusual for them than it was for you, because you probably had some exposure to American culture through media. And what did they know about Ireland? Other than, that you eat potatoes or whatever they were asking you, right? So it was maybe more of a culture shock for them.
oh, definitely. Yeah. I try and explain it to them. And then they'd be like, Connor, like, I know you just said something, but I have a clue what you said, man. You need to learn how to talk American. Like they kind of say that because I'd be speaking with an accent and I'd be speaking fast and they just wouldn't have a clue. And then they'd be like, so Connor, you have a passport, right? And I'm like, yeah, I've two. And they're like, damn. It's like, you ever been to Europe? I was like, yeah, I've been to Europe. And
As an Irish person?
I was like, I live in Europe. Because like a lot of them, like not even 20 minutes outside their house. They haven't left like further than 20 minutes outside. 95, 99% of the players don't even have a passport. So like the CFL would call them, and I know we're talking a lot about more American football now than real estate, but the Canadian Football League would call them and be like, we're really interested. And they'd be like, oh yeah, sorry, I don't have a passport. And they like half of them just couldn't even be bothered going to the passport office and getting it done, or whatever. And they wouldn't go play CFL,
It's a very complicated process.
Yeah, but it's just like, I mean, it's such an easy barrier to get over to go play professional football, and they just like wouldn't do it, so.
That was too much. Just getting the passport was too much.
Yeah.
You mentioned that some people didn't understand you. I think in North America, we have kind of a bad rap for not understanding accents, like putting subtitles on for like, British TV shows and whatever. We're not super savvy when it comes to accents. What are some of the Canadian words or even American ones that you've learned since being here for so long that are different than Ireland, I guess?
Well, definitely the A definitely pops out. I know that's like the obvious one, but it very obvious when it came in first. Now, mainly the older generation. I found the younger generation actually in Vancouver, they would say hey at the end of a sentence instead of hey. They'd be like, you know what I mean? Hey.
Yeah.
I think it's like a West Coast thing. So that kind of took me when I was working at summer camp in particular. All the girl camp counselors would all say that. And I was like, hey. And I was just like, I'd go to my buddy who was also from Cork. I'd be like, hey. Just kind of like joke.
I mean, I think people get the A wrong about Canada too, right? Like in American media, if they want to make fun of Canadians, they just put A at the end of everything, right? Oh, I'm Canadian, eh? And it's like, we don't use A like that. A is not a question. It's a confirmation of something that both people understand, right? Like it needs to be obvious what you're saying in order to say A. It can't be a legitimate question or really even a statement. Like if you go outside and it's cold and you're standing next to someone and both people can see that it's cold, you could say, wow, it's a little nippy, eh? Because the other person is thinking the same thing that you are. It's not an actual question. It's a bonding thing more than anything. I think people don't understand that. They think we just put it at the end of every sentence or something.
I think you phrased that perfectly, and it made me think, we actually have a word like that in Cork. Like Cork's got a lot of different accents, even within its its place. You can tell where someone's from in Cork by their accent. And one of the things we say quite a bit, which is mocked the rest of the country, is we put like at the end of our sentences. So I might say, well, I'm from Cork, like, do you know what I mean? Like,
Uh-huh.
or if we're outside, but instead of it being freezing, we're in Cork, so it's raining. So it's like, geez, lashing rain, like. They'd be like, yeah, like.
Okay.
And so we use it in like a very similar context. The way you just explained it made me think of that. So like, it's something we say a lot in
Like,
Cork.
I have heard Irish people say that, and I go like, yeah, like, yeah. I guess that makes sense. It's like you're confirming. You're seeing what I'm seeing. You're experiencing the same thing that I'm experiencing.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. And then I guess in if like similar words and the stuff I learned playing football was like honestly a lot of the black lingo. Like I'd be listening to stuff and I'd be sitting really quietly and really trying to concentrate, and I would not understand the context of the conversation at all. Like not one bit. Like the whole thing go over. Talk about like having subtitles on British TV shows, like you're watching The Crown. I needed some like real life subtitles. I needed like some fella in the corner, like writing stuff on a sign and being like, you know,
uh,
like and equals $1,000. I'd be like, oh, thank you.
right.
Just stuff like whizzed by me. You kind of sometimes get the connotations of the conversation, but not a lot. Like I was lost half the time. But
Yeah, I guess like the farther you get away from the standard English language, the more difficult it becomes for people that aren't a part of that group to understand it. And I think that's also why a lot of Canadians would say that Irish English is maybe one of the hardest to understand, because it does seem significantly farther than the standard variety than, let's say, American or Canadian or like English or something like that.
right, yeah, you also, I guess I should say you, but North Americans in general speak slower.
Yeah.
You enunciate better than us. We tend to mumble, we tend to speak quickly, and we tend to speak in a lot of slang to each other and use different words for a bunch of stuff that's not like the standard English word. Like this is a word we kind of made up. Like langer is a word in Cork, which can mean anything from like someone you're like great friends with and who's a sound guy to someone who's like, an idiot and you don't like him. It depends on
Okay.
it depends on how you pronounce the word and what the context is. So like,
Uh-huh.
I pity a person, who's coming to Ireland, trying to like bring someone from Cork now, for example. Like we've a lot of immigrants as well from Africa, like a lot of Nigerians, a lot of Somalians, a lot of people from Senegal, and they listen to someone talking about a langer, like for 10 minutes, and they're like, what is this word? I've never heard of this word in my entire life. And they're there to learn English. Like it's not maybe the best place to learn it.
So like you said that you can tell where someone is from even within Cork. Like there's all these different accents. So what would your accent be categorized as?
I probably sound like I have a bit of a city accent, a bit like the north side of the city, but not heavy into the north, and that's kind of where I'm from. But mine's like dulled down quite a bit. But like if you lived about 15 minutes away from me, 15 minutes north of the north side of Cork City, like different accent entirely. If it went like 30 minutes to the east, kind of a different accent. If it went like 2 hours to the west, like totally different accent. To the point where like I've been there before. 2 hours to the west, this small town called Goleen. It's one crossroads. It's got 5 pubs, one church, like a post office, and like a takeaway. And I went in there to ask a guy what time the bus comes. The guy owned the pub, and I had to ask the guy like 3 times because I live in the same county as him, like in the same kind of not. It wasn't. We were outside the city, but we're literally from the same place. And when you kind of ask someone a question and they answer you back and like, oh, sorry, I just wasn't listening. What did you say? And he said it again, like exactly the same. And I was like, oh, sorry, I just didn't hear you. And then he laughed at his friend who was at the pub, like having a pint or whatever, and they said the same thing again, and I was like, oh great, thank you. No idea what he said, no idea what time the bus came. I just went back home. I just hadn't a clue what he said. So just to get like there's that amount of diversity within like a very small pocket in Ireland, and I yet to see that really in Canada or the US, to be honest.
Oh yeah, I mean there's way less accents. Like it's crazy when you look at like I don't know if they're like continuums or whatever it is, but like the transition of accents through so many different countries in Europe and the UK, the diversity there is crazy. I mean, in Canada, how many accents do we really have? Like we have, our Newfies from Newfoundland that, have that kind of Irish tilt actually. And then we have everyone else. I mean, there are. I mean, it's not quite that simple. I do think that people,
There's an
towards
Alberta
the
accent, though,
east,
isn't there? There's
there's
definitely.
the Alberta boy accent or whatever you see on like TikTok, and yeah, I mean, people
Hey,
people do
bud.
talk like that.
What's up,
Hey,
bud?
bud. Yeah, out for a rip, are you, bud? Oh, geez. Like, yeah, there's all that. Yeah, there's that stuff, and I can hear a little bit of a difference with like people from Ontario. The way that they say the R is different, but like we're talking about like a really minor difference. Like in Ireland, it would be much more extreme, obviously.
Yeah, like it's something I think about when I come here. I'm like, yeah, geez, I can guess where you're from in Cork from the sound of your accent, or even Dublin as well. Like Dublin's got distinct north, south, and then different pockets. You can kind of tell where they're from, which is I think kind of cool. I mean, it gives a sense of like how tightly knit the communities were or must have been to all kind of start sounding the same and different than the community that's like right next to you. And I don't think you get the same kind of feeling here. I guess that's one of the big differences I noticed from Ireland and here is like we're like a very old country and we've been pretty much around the same areas for like thousands of years. We haven't really moved much. Whereas North America, like Canada and the US, are really young countries in like the grander scheme of things. And
Yeah.
so that's why a lot of people just kind of sound the same because you had access to like communications when you became countries, whether it's like letters or whatever, spoken speech. We didn't really have as much access to that. So
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. I guess I didn't really think of it that way, but like if you don't have exposure to the town next door, that's where that accent is going to really develop and become its own unique thing, right? If everyone's talking to each other all the time, you're going to get like a more neutral accent.
yeah, exactly. And I noticed that when I came here, I was quite like I didn't really know many Irish people in Ottawa. As I said, there is not many Irish people when I moved there. And my one of my bosses, my agents I worked for, was from Quebec, like a town up north. And he couldn't understand me for the first 2 months. So I actually started getting quite shy. Like, he would ask me to print something off. Like he'd be like, "Oh, Connor, can you like print off this piece of paper, in a French accent?" And I'd be like, "Oh yeah, grand, no bother, yeah, I'll do that right away." Wouldn't he like wouldn't click to what I like that I had said yes. I just said it in an Irish way,
Right.
and he would go in to my other boss who like could understand me better and he goes, "I asked Connor to print this off. Can you just make sure he does it? Because he said something to me and I don't know what he said." And so my accent ended up flattening like a ton, became very, very flat. I spoke like this most of the time. I was trying to enunciate myself better. I would slow down and I would speak like slower and I'd say words like, "I'll do a pint." And I'd say things like, "Where's the garbage?" And I'd say, like, I really did to the point where I was like, "Oh, I don't feel like myself." And then I tried to kind of let myself out a little bit more.
So have you found a compromise in the middle now where you feel like yourself, but you're still, understood?
Do I realized that there's a ton of value in the way I sound and what I say and how I say it. And I think it's actually invaluable. So I don't like flattening an accent just so someone can understand you a bit clearer. I would rather explain the same thing to them the way I say it about 5 times, but still remain myself rather than flatten it out totally for them just to
Yeah.
be that person. And it took me a while to realize that, to be honest, because I was always trying to blend in. I was trying to do well. I was trying to, not be the person that stood out too much because I thought that was a bad thing. But I think standing out when you're being yourself, when you're being authentic and you're being kind, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I think people love like a little bit of difference. People like when people sound a bit different and they can learn something else. We don't just eat potatoes, Ty. We actually we have carrots. We have
You have multiple types of potatoes.
yeah, we do have multiple types too. It was Canadian Thanksgiving. I had 3 types of potatoes. And I loved them. It was mashed, roast, and scalloped. And they're absolutely delicious. But we've really good beef in Ireland. We've good quality meats and chicken, and we have really nice stew. We have cottage pie, we have shepherd's pie. We have bacon, we have rashers, we have breakfast rolls, we've full all types of stuff. So I think those sort of things are that in particular, but the accent I think is so important. I think it's really important to remain yourself. Like you could go to the West Coast and you could be there for, I'm not sure how long you've been there, but you could be there for 10 years and you might lose all the little like Alberta twang you had. And you kind of end up blending into the place and you're kind of like, well, no, like I'm not exactly that person. I know where I was born, I know where I was raised, like I was, and I think I need to remember that because otherwise, if I go back, I won't know who I am. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, another comparison, I know I'm bringing it back to the US a lot, but they have what they call a melting pot in the US in terms of diversity, right? So you come from a different country, you go to the US and you get melted down and become an American, right? Whatever that means, you're an American. And in Canada, we have what some people refer to as a mosaic. So as opposed to multiple colors coming together and getting blended down into something Canadian, we have this quilt of patchwork, colors and races and accents and food, and it can be unique and it can be standalone and it can be Canadian at the same time. And so I think that's a good way of looking at it. Why should you change who you are if you're in a different place? Why can't we as Canadians benefit from your experience as, someone from Ireland, right? And I love that about Canada.
I do too. And I think you phrased that really well. I just thought of something that I thought of when I came initially. I had heard stories about people going to Canada or going to Australia. A lot of Irish people emigrate to Australia. I wasn't sure if you knew that, but they're the two countries that we emigrate to a lot. Very easy access to visas. And a lot of people will go there for a year or two, and the only people they hang out with when they go there are Irish people. They seek them out for comfort. They seek them out because they know what the deal is, or for help with apartments or work, whatever. But then they only end up majority of the time hanging out with people from Ireland. And then what do? Is they leave the next year, they leave next 2 years because they're really not experiencing the country that they're in. So I remember making a point of it. I was like, I'm not going to just hang with Irish people. I'm not just going to go to an Irish pub to socialize. I'm not just going to go to Irish events or networking. I'm going to talk to Canadians or talk to people from different cultures. And it had been my two best friends was one guy was 1/16 Indigenous, but he's a white guy. But I got that story out of it. I thought it was fascinating. He used to go bird watching and stuff like that, which I never knew anyone did bird watching before. And with her, with another girl, then she was our other best friend, little trio. She was from Haiti. She'd moved here when she was 11. She learned English when she was 12. Her first language is French, her second language is Haitian Creole, her third language is English. And it was the three amigos, and walking the tough streets of Ottawa, having a great old time. And I would have never probably been best friends with them if I had a different attitude about it. And I just hung out with the Irish people that I met in the first couple of weeks. And I think that's incredibly important is when you go to a culture, experience a culture. I was in Chengdu, which is the capital of the Sichuan province in China. I was there for a month as part of my college, and I ended up becoming good friends with this Chinese kid who was an English sports reporter. And he took me to this restaurant, not a lick of it was in English. It was up 3 flights of stairs, a fire escape. It was basically in someone's living room, but they were cooking some food. I don't know what it was. And I had a great meal, could barely understand anything anyone was saying. And I vividly remember that experience because it was fantastic. And I don't know, I was there at the time with 13 other Irish people who were from the university, and not one of them wanted to go. I invited some of them and they're like, oh, that sounds kind of mad or sounds a bit sketchy, or no, we'll just hang out here and chat to each other. And I went and had this unreal experience, unreal authentic Chengdu experience that was just, eating in someone's house and just having a really, really nice time and kind of walking the street with my buddy there that a lot of people would never have had if they, hang out with their own people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's that is the way to do it, right? And I think it comes down to being vulnerable as well. I think it's vulnerable to be ourselves and not to change to fit into other groups. And it's also vulnerable to put ourselves in environments where we maybe stand out and maybe make some mistakes and, look silly or whatever it might be. And I love that about, cultural exchange. It's so challenging, but it's so worth it at the same time. And so that's why I love doing this podcast as well. Even here sitting in Vancouver, I can learn something from you about Ireland and even learn something about Canada. And, I just love doing this. And this has been a great conversation. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Let me ask you one thing before we go. So what's your favorite Colombian food? Because one of the things they have here, so there's lots of Venezuelans here, there's lots of Colombians, there's a lot of kind of Central and South Americans here in general, but I don't think I've actually gone to a Colombian restaurant yet. But there are a few here. So I don't know if you have any tips for me.
when I was living in Colombia, one of my favorite things to eat was arroz especial, which is special rice, it's called.
Okay.
And it's a kind of a fried, I guess it's like a fried rice. You can get different meat in it, but the one that I liked had shrimp and also that fried pork, chicharron. It had chicharron pieces, shrimp, and then like maybe some vegetables in it. And it was like a fried dish. And then it came with this sweet sauce that you put on top, which was maybe like in the vein of a plum sauce, but not quite. And so that was really good. Yeah, that was excellent. Another one that's like super traditional Colombian is arepa rellena, which is... if you know Venezuelan people, this will probably create a conflict for you, so maybe don't bring it up with them because they are Colombians and Venezuelans argue about who invented the arepa, which is like this little flatbread. But anyway, it's this flatbread thing cut in half and then filled with like, could be chicken, could be sausages cut up, could be, I think, maybe not so much beef, but could be pork. And it's almost like a hamburger, but made with this specific Colombian bread and then like different types of meat. So arepa rellena, arroz especial. That would be my go-to.
I'm going to see if I can seek them out. So.
There's like one Colombian restaurant in Vancouver and we went to it and it was very disappointing. We didn't really like it. Tons of Mexican food here in Vancouver, not a lot of Colombian food. So yeah, if you can find one in Toronto, go for it.
Well, I went to a Chilean restaurant recently. It was around the corner from an open house and I hadn't eaten before the open house and it was a slow open house. So I was like Googling places to eat, found a Chilean place around the corner and it was absolutely unbelievable. I went in there, just talked to the guy for a little bit. He had a bunch of empanadas, some of the best I've ever had. I got 2 of them and then he got this, this barbecue style meat. I guess it's kind of like almost Brazilian style, but it was the Chilean style. I can't remember what it was called, but it was just like exquisite. It was so good. So I'm all for kind of like doing stuff like that. So I appreciate the recommendations.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, Latin food is awesome. I think a lot of times people assume that like, well, maybe it's my own ignorance. I assumed that Latin food was similar to Mexican food. It's not at all. Like there's some of the same base ingredients, but the spices and everything, the way that they prepare it couldn't be more different. And so yeah, all through Latin America is like a whole culinary adventure wherever you go.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in San Diego, like a lot, playing football as well, and that's basically kind of like Mexico almost in terms of like food culture. It's got tons and tons of Mexican food, so I'm very well acquainted to Mexican food, which is delicious. So
it's good as well. Okay, sweet. Thank you, Conor. Let's wrap it up here. But before we do, tell people how they can find your content online. Maybe they want to buy a house or something in Toronto. How can they get a hold of you?
Absolutely. You can find me at Mayhem Homes. Mayhem is my dog's name, but my name's Conor. You'll find me there on all platforms. I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram. On YouTube, I'm at Love Living in Toronto. But if you Google Mayhem Homes, it will also pop up. So I've got a bunch of stuff there. If you're looking to buy or sell, absolutely reach out. If you're looking for just a couple of tips about Toronto, I do a lot of neighborhood videos. I do a lot of food videos. I do a lot of different places to go out and socialize and eat or explore. So just hit me up or DM me. I'll be happy to send you some suggestions. So
perfect. Okay. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you later.
Cheers. Thank you, Jared.